Joining me to help us digest and understand what's going on is Dr Simon Boxall, a senior lecturer in oceanography at Southampton University. Dr Boxall, I'm quite sure you're watching that as avidly as I was and the rest of the world too. And obviously the first thing to say is our thoughts and prayers and hopes haven't yet abated. As the Coast Guard kept saying, we must have hope, we must have hope. But what did you deduce from what's been said there?
There is still hope, and as he made it very clear, this is still a rescue mission. This is still search and rescue, and that means they're looking for survivors. They're looking to save people from the ocean. This is not a recovery exercise yet. Recovery basically means that they've given up hope and they're trying to recover the vessel, the submersible, to analyse what went wrong. So we are still in rescue mode. It's very clear that they are taking these sound pulses, these sound noises from the ocean very seriously. They wouldn't be spending this much analysis. Carl made it very clear from we're told that they feel that they probably discounted, not completely, sort of animal sounds and things. But there are a lot of other things in the area. There are a lot of ships in the area. So that noise could be coming from a ship. Now, if I was in the submarine, if I was in the submersible and I wanted to get a signal through, I'd look at some sort of regular pulse, regular pattern. We don't know if that's what they're hearing, but the fact they're analysing it closely means that there's a possibility that is the case. Otherwise, they'd probably dismiss it sooner. And it means they can then start to focus the search into the source of that sound. Now, you can't pinpoint it. You can sort of narrow the search area down a bit. But they're still looking at a very large area. And of course, he was perhaps being a bit optimistic. Time is ticking over and oxygen is one of the limiting factors they've got down there. We can survive without food and things for a long time, but they really do need oxygen. So, the estimates for oxygen levels have come from the owners of the vessel. We have to believe those are correct. He made it very clear that a lot of equipment has now arrived in the area. If they can find the vessel, Titan, if they can find Titan, then the potential for recovering it is reasonably good. They have now got a lot of equipment in the area. They can use ROVs, these remotely operated vehicles, which have manipulators. They can attach cables and things to the submersible, and that would enable it to be brought to the surface. And, the equipment they've got out there is capable of working well beyond the 4,000 meters water depth that they've got here. The French one.
Can you explain, in the miraculous event that they do find the vessel, and obviously everybody's praying that they will, and now all sorts of sophisticated equipment has arrived to enable that thing to happen. So let's imagine, let's pray that it does. If and when it does, and it has to be soon, we all understand that, what do they need to do to recover this vessel from so many, many, many miles under the sea?
Ordinarily, it would be a virtually impossible task, but they have state-of-the-art technology available to them at the moment. And all they've already got to do is get some sort of cable onto the vessel. There are plenty of places they can attach a cable to. If they can get a cable around it, they can bring it to the surface. And although we know this thing weighs several tons, of course, in water, it's not quite neutrally buoyant, but it's fairly buoyant. If it wasn't, it would just sink like a stone. So they've not got to have a huge amount of lifting capability to bring it up from that depth. It will take time. Bringing something in along 4 kilometers is going to take a couple of hours. But once they've located it, they can bring it to the surface. And at that point, they can open up the vessel, they can open up the submersible to get to the people inside.
And what are your thoughts on these kind of private companies offering excursions as if they're kind of pleasure boat cruises or a punt up the Cam or something like that to go and look at the wreckage of the Titanic? I understand there's almost a universal fascination with the Titanic and with anything at all that pertains to it. Also tremendous fascination and awe of the sea, the ocean, its magnitude, everything else. But the idea that these are kind of unregulated companies operating for profit, charging a great deal of money to very wealthy people who can afford to spend £250,000 on a trip that's meant to last only a matter of hours. Does it sound to you like free enterprise and something that's absolutely fine? Everybody enters at their own risk? Or now so many different countries and resources are involved in trying to locate this vessel. Does it strike you as something very different indeed?
Well, we're seeing a sort of a proliferation of this sort of tourism. You've got Elon Musk taking people up into space. We've got, Virgin and people like that working on this. So whether it's going into outer space or inner space, our oceans or our inner space, they both carry incredible risk. And, I've heard a few people say, well, of course, there's the research element to this. There is no research element to this at all. This is purely tourism.
Yes.
So at what point do we say this is unacceptable? I don't know. There's that whole freedom of choice. Of course, you could argue this is tying up a lot of resource, putting other people at risk potentially. But this rescue mission is being done very safely. It's a very difficult question to answer, and of course, they're working in international waters. There is no law to restrict this sort of operation. I don't know. I mean, put it bluntly, you wouldn't find me in one of these.
I was just going to ask that. I was going to ask, had you the resources, the cash and the opportunity to take such a trip, would you have wanted to do so? Would you do so?
No, absolutely not.
Just too dangerous, is that why?
It's too dangerous. And also from the research point of view, I mean, we in the UK, we have deep capable ROVs. The French have got them, Americans got them. In research today, we tend to use these remotely operated vehicles. You can't do anything in a submersible with people in it that you cannot do better with an ROV. Okay, 50, 60 years ago, that wasn't the case. But today, ROVs are incredibly sophisticated. They have high definition cameras. The nice thing is you send the ROV down, it can stay down there for days, and you control it from a very comfortable laboratory on the surface ship. You have shifts, so you can go and have coffee, you can go and sleep and so on, someone else takes over. You're achieving far more with that. And they're a tenth of the price of these very expensive submersibles. So I'm probably a bit of a killjoy and say, actually, you question the whole thing about, do we need submersibles? And the UK has not gone down that in terms of research. That route is one we've avoided just because of the risk and because there's no benefit to it.
Don't seem like a killjoy to me. Every word you utter seems eminently sensible. Thank you so much for joining us as a guest. I really hope that maybe we book the same oceanographer tomorrow, and yet we have good news. That's what